I'm not paying a damn thing. You want $17,000 from a blind man? Are you people out of your minds?
Who's buying it? The only question I have is, how does a blind man get 41 traffic tickets? Start explaining now!
Broken system stealing from a blind man. They're explanation.
It's a number that doesn't just represent a fine. It's a declaration of war. $17,300. 41 separate traffic violations, painting a picture of a menace on the roads of Los Angeles. The courtroom doors swing open, and Judge Judith Sterling doesn't walk in, she enters. Every step is a punctuation mark. The gallery, a packed theater of murmurs, falls dead silent. The camera's unblinking eyes lock onto her. Case file gripped like a verdict already written, she takes her seat at the bench. This isn't just another day. This is where faceless bureaucracy meets a woman who believes in faces. She scans the room. At the plaintiff's table, the state's representative, Eleanor Vance from the DMV's Compliance Division. Crisp suit, a stack of files so thick it could stop a bullet. Confident, unmoved. She's here to collect dot, then Judge Sterling looks to the defendant's table. And she stops. Seated there is Arthur Millwood. 83 years old. The kind of age that carries weight in its silence. On his face, a pair of opaque, dark-lensed sunglasses. Leaned against the table, a white cane with a red tip. His hands, mapped with the blue highways of a long life, rest calmly in his lap. Beside him, not a lawyer, but his granddaughter, Chloe, early 20s, one hand firmly, protectively on the old man's shoulder. Her jaw is set, but her eyes are a storm of anger and fear. Judge Sterling doesn't bother with pleasantries. Her voice, a blade honed on decades of nonsense, cuts through the formalities. Mr. Millwood, the state of California claims you owe $17,300, 41 moving violations, speeding, running red lights, reckless endangerment, all within a 16-month period. How do you plead? Arthur Millwood turns his head slowly, orienting toward the sound of her voice. His own voice is quiet, sandpapered by time, but steady. Your Honor, I plead confused. I can't answer for crimes I didn't commit. Judge Sterling's eyes narrow. She picks up the citation summary. The documentation says otherwise, sir. 41 citations. That's a pattern of deliberate, repeated offense. What is your explanation? A faint, almost imperceptible tightening of his jaw. My explanation, Your Honor, is that I have been legally blind since 2011. I haven't so much as touched a steering wheel in over 12 years. The air in the courtroom vanishes. It's sucked out by a collective, stunned gasp that never makes a sound. The camera operators freeze. Eleanor Vance's pen stops scratching. For a heartbeat, there's only the hum of the lights and the impossible statement hanging in the air. Judge Sterling slowly removes her reading glasses, placing them on the bench with a deliberate click. She leans forward, her gaze laser-focused on the man who cannot return it. Let me be certain I understand you, Mr. Millwood. You are telling this court that you are legally blind? Yes, Your Honor, macular degeneration. It took my driver's license, my independence, and most of the faces of my family. It did not, however, give me the ability to drive a car I do not own. Judge Sterling picks up the citation list again. Her eyes, now sharp without the lenses, fly down the pages. Details snap into focus. California license plate 5XYL889. Violations logged from the Pacific Coast Highway to the heart of downtown, from midnight to midday. She looks up. This plate 5XYL889. Is it registered to you? It is not, Your Honor, Arthur replies. I surrendered my plates and my license the day my specialist told me I was a danger to myself and others on the road. That was my last day as a driver. Chloe, the granddaughter, speaks up. Her voice trembles with the effort to keep it level. Your Honor, I take my grandfather everywhere. To his medical appointments at the West LA VA, to the grocery store, to the park so he can feel the sun. He uses that cane for every single step. He can't see the television 2 feet in front of him. The idea that he's drag racing on the 405 it's insane. Judge Sterling doesn't acknowledge Chloe yet. Her attention is on the mechanism of the state. She gestures to the bailiff. Get me the complete GMV registration and driving history for Mr. Arthur Millwood. Right now. The bailiff moves swiftly. She then turns the full force of her attention to Eleanor Vance. Ms. Vance, you represent the Department of Motor Vehicles. Explain this to me. How does a blind 83-year-old man accrue 41 moving violations in 16 months? Eleanor Vance doesn't flinch. She's prepared for deflection, for excuses, not for this. But her training holds. Your Honor, our records unequivocally show that the vehicle associated with these violations is registered in Mr. Millwood's name. The license plate is captured by automated traffic enforcement systems across multiple jurisdictions. The system matches the plate to the owner. That is the procedure. The procedure, Judge Sterling repeats, the words dripping with a quiet, simmering disdain. So, your procedure is an automated letter generation machine. It sees a plate, prints a name, and mails a threat. And at no point did this procedure involve a human being with a functioning brainstem asking a single, obvious question. Before Eleanor can mount a defense, Judge Sterling holds up a hand. She turns, looking directly into the primary camera, her gaze connecting with every person watching. I want you to think about this. Right now. Before we go any further, how does the system get this broken? If you're watching, tell me where you're from in the comments. And if something smells wrong to you, and it should share this. Someone needs to see what happens when the machine is allowed to run without a soul. You're watching the Sterling Standard, where the truth gets its day in court, no matter who tries to bury it. She turns back, the warmth gone from her face, replaced by granite. Ms. Vance, your procedure alleges that this man, with a white cane, was doing 92 miles an hour on the 110 freeway at 2:17 a.m. Does that sound even remotely plausible to your common sense? Or did you leave that at the door with your humanity? Eleanor shifts, a crack in the professional armor. Your Honor, I can only present the data as it exists in our system. The data, Judge Sterling scoffs. Let's talk data. Mr. Millwood surrendered his license in 2011. That is in your system, is it not? Eleanor consults her file, her finger tracing a line. A slight hesitation. Yes, Your Honor, he was issued a state identification card at that time. It was renewed in 2017, and again last year. Judge Sterling leans back, the picture becoming horrifically clear. So, for 12 years, your own records state this man is not a driver. The state of California has officially certified him as a non-driver, twice, and yet, somehow he's a habitual traffic offender. Does your data explain that contradiction, or does it just ignore it? Eleanor opens her mouth, but the bailiff returns, handing a new, thicker file to Judge Sterling. She opens it, her eyes scanning the contents. Her expression, already stern, transforms into one of pure, unadulterated fury. She looks from the file to Arthur Millwood, then back again. Mr. Millwood, she says, her voice low and dangerous. According to this fresh data from your department, Ms. Vance, you don't own just one car. You own 4. A Ford Mustang GT, a Chevrolet Tahoe, a Lexus sedan, and a Jeep Wrangler. The courtroom erupts. Chloe's eyes go wide. Arthur's head cocks, confusion and distress breaking through his calm demeanor. That can't be, he stammers, his hand finding his cane for stability. Your Honor, my last car was a 2004 Buick. I sold it to help pay for my wife's hospice care. I haven't owned a vehicle since. A cold silence descends. Judge Sterling closes the file with a finality that echoes. She looks at Chloe. Young lady. Approach the bench. Asterisk Chloe Millwood walks forward, the click of her heels the only sound in the cavernous room. She's terrified, it's in the slight tremble of her hands, but she meets Judge Sterling's gaze without blinking. How long have you been your grandfather's primary caretaker? The judge's tone is softer now, but no less intense. Since Nana passed, Your Honor, that was 12 years ago. I was 11. And in all that time, has Arthur Millwood ever, for 1 second, operated a motor vehicle? Never, cloches, the word forceful, absolute. He can't see the curb. He can't see the food on his plate. I have to describe the colors of his clothes to him every morning. The idea that he's driving a A Mustang? She lets out a short, incredulous breath. It's laughable. It's cruel. Judge Sterling gives a single slow nod. When did you discover these alleged violations? Chloe pulls a crumpled, official-looking envelope from her purse. Her anger makes her fingers clumsy. 3 weeks ago, Grandpa asked me to read his mail. He gets a pension statement. Instead, I found this. A final notice. $17,300. It said they would begin garnishing his Social Security and his VA benefits if it wasn't paid in full within 10 days. Her voice finally cracks. He gets $1,550 a month, Your Honor. Total. That's his food, his medicine, his life. They were going to take it. Asterisk. Judge Sterling takes the envelope. She doesn't just read it. She absorbs it. You can see the temperature in the room drop several degrees as she does. She turns to Eleanor Vance. Miss Vance, your procedure was about to garnish a blind veteran's subsistence income for tickets he could not possibly have gotten. Eleanor's complexion has lost its professional sheen. Your Honor, the transition to collections is automated after 90 days of non-payment. It's the standard protocol for... Judge Sterling's hand slaps the bench. Not a theatrical bang, but a sharp, percussive crack that makes everyone jump. Do not, she whispers with terrifying clarity, say protocol to me again. Protocol is how good people convince themselves they're not doing evil. Your protocol is a moral bypass. She turns back to the damning file. You cite photographic evidence? I want to see it, now. Eleanor stands, retrieves a folder from her table, and hands it to the bailiff. Judge Sterling opens it, pulling out glossy 8x10 prints. The first shows a sleek black Ford Mustang with heavily tinted windows, frozen in the act of blasting through a red light. The license plate is clear, 5XYLA89. The second shows the same car on a different day. Radar rating 89 mph. The third, taken at 3 a.m. Shows it weaving through sparse traffic. Judge Sterling holds one up toward Arthur, then realizes and turns it to the courtroom camera instead. Mr. Millwood, does this car look familiar? Have you ever owned a black Ford Mustang? Arthur simply shakes his head. No, ma'am. My Buick was beige. I bought it brand new. It never went over 65. Judge Sterling weighs the photos down in a neat, accusing row. This vehicle has a legal window tint. Aftermarket rims. It is, by all appearances, not the car of an 83-year-old blind man. It is the car of someone who does not want to be seen. Miss Vance, who is driving it. Eleanor clears her throat. The tint prevents clear identification of the driver, Your Honor, but you can see the plate. Yes, and that was enough. A plate. No face. No verification. Just a computer making a blind man a criminal. Judge Sterling's voice is now dangerously quiet. Bailiff, I want a detective from the Financial Crimes and Identity Theft Unit here. Immediately. As the bailiff moves, Judge Sterling leans back, steepling her fingers. Her eyes are on Eleanor Vance, dissecting her. While we wait, let's examine the geography of this crime spree. Sherman Oaks at noon. Long Beach at 8 p.m., Riverside at midnight. These locations are dozens of miles apart. Tickets issued within hours of each other. Mr. Millwood, do you travel that extensively? Arthur shakes his head. My world is small, Your Honor. My house, close apartment, the VA clinic, and the market down the street. That's the map of my life now. I don't go to Riverside. I wouldn't know how. Judge Sterling's gaze swings back to Eleanor. So, we have a car he doesn't own, registered in his name, driving all over Southern California, committing violations he can't see. And your department's only contribution was to bill him for it, and then threaten to starve him when he couldn't pay. Is that an accurate summary? Eleanor Vance has no answer. The courtroom door opens. A man in a well-cut suit, badge on his belt, enters with the calm authority of someone who deals with chaos for a living. He approaches the bench. Your Honor, Detective Ben Carter, LAPD Financial Crimes. Detective Carter, Judge Sterling says, gesturing to the evidence. We have a situation. A blind non-driver has 4 high-performance vehicles registered in his name and 41 tickets to match. Explain that to me. Detective Carter opens a slim notebook. Your Honor, I ran Mr. Millwood's name when your clerk called. His case isn't unique. It's part of a pattern we've been uncovering for about 8 months. The gallery stirs. Chloe's grip on her grandfather's shoulder turns white-knuckled. What kind of pattern? Judge Sterling's voice is flat, elderly, disabled, and in several cases, deceased individuals are showing new vehicle registrations they never applied for. Their identities are being used as clean fronts. Scale, Detective. We have 187 confirmed victims so far. Another 100 or so are pending verification. The number lands like a physical blow. 187. Arthur Millwood bows his head. Judge Sterling is statue still. 187 people, Miss Vance. Did the DMV know about this investigation? Eleanor's face is ashen. Your Honor, I was briefed on a widespread fraud investigation just last week. I wasn't given specifics or victim names. I had no idea Mr. Millwood was involved. Convenient, Judge Sterling murmurs. She focuses on Carter. You have a source? We do, Carter nods. A DMV registration clerk named Darren Finch, age 32. Worked out of the Hollywood office for 6 years. He had access to the database of non-driver ID holders, the elderly, the disabled. He used their information to create fraudulent vehicle registrations and sold them for $2,500 apiece. Cash or untraceable crypto. The buyers were people with suspended licenses, undocumented immigrants, individuals who wanted a clean registration for illegal activities. Judge Sterling looks at the photo of the black Mustang, and the tickets went to the people on the registration. The perfect targets. People who might not see the mail, might not understand it, or might be too afraid or infirm to fight. Arthur Millwood's breath hitches. Chloe is now kneeling beside him, whispering, "How much did Finch make?" Judge Sterling asks, her knuckles pale on the bench. We've tracked over $800,000. He bought a condo in Miami, a Rolex, took luxury experience vacations. He was living large on the backs of the most vulnerable people in the state. Judge Sterling's eyes are slits of cold fire. 800,000. While men like Mr. Millwood were choosing between medicine and food because of his fun money. She turns the inferno of her gaze on Eleanor Vance. When did the DMV first notice Darren Finch was a criminal? Eleanor's notes rattle in her hands. The internal security audit flagged irregularities 9 months ago, Your Honor. The police were brought in shortly after. 9 months. And how long was he operating? Approximately 3 years. 3 years. Judge Sterling's voice finally rises, not in volume, but in sheer scalding intensity. For 3 years, this parasite fed on your system, and for 3 years, your protocol sent his victims to collections. What did you do to help them, Ms. Vance? What active steps did the DMV take to find the Arthur Millwoods and stop the bleeding? Asterisk, the silence that follows Judge Sterling's question is absolute and damning. Eleanor Vance looks down at her trembling hands, then at her notes, finding no salvation there. She finally meets the judge's eyes, and hers are filled with a dawning, horrifying comprehension. We relied on the police investigation to identify the victims for restitution, Your Honor. You relied, Judge Sterling repeats, letting the word hang, rotten, in the air. You didn't act. You waited, while the letters kept going out, while the threats of garnishment kept being made. She picks up the collections notice again. This is dated last month, Ms. Vance. The police were already investigating. Did your reliance include telling the collections agency to pause? To stop terrorizing blind octogenarians? Eleanor has no answer. The color has drained completely from her face. Judge Sterling sets the paper down with terrifying control. This collections process. It's outsourced, correct? A private firm does your dirty work. It's a standard state contract, Your Honor, for efficiency. Asterisk, efficiency. The word is a curse on Judge Sterling's lips. It's efficient, all right. Efficient at destroying lives. You handed a fraudulent file, to a bounty hunter and told them to collect. You didn't ask questions. You just passed the buck and washed your hands. That ends today. Right now. She turns to Detective Carter. These 187 victims. What's the total financial burden? Fines, penalties, collections, fees. Carter consults his notebook. Our preliminary estimate is just over $3 million, Your Honor, and that's just the base fines. Many victims paid late fees, collection surcharges. We've already identified 47 who paid something, some drained retirement accounts, some took high-interest loans. 2 had benefits garnished before we could stop it. Judge Sterling looks at Chloe. Did your grandfather pay anything? Asterisk. Chloe nods, tears of fury now tracking down her cheeks. The first notice last year, it scared him so much. He thought he must have done something wrong, that his memory was gone. He sent them $400. It was from the fund we set aside for his eventual funeral expenses. Her voice breaks. He paid for his own fake crimes with his burial money. Judge Sterling closes her eyes for a long moment. When she opens them, they're bleak. Miss Vance, will Arthur Millwood get that $400 back? The restitution process will see that all verified victims are made whole. Your Honor, Eleanor recites, clinging to bureaucratic language like a life raft. When? The word is a whip crack. The fund requires legislative approval and appropriation. It could take... Don't say it. Judge Sterling interrupts, her voice deathly quiet. Don't you dare tell me it could take a year or 2. This man is 83. He doesn't have a year or 2 to wait for you to give him back money you stole from him through negligence. Yes or no, will he get a check for the full amount he paid plus damages within the next 30 days? Asterisk. Eleanor Vance is trapped. Your Honor, I don't have the authority to cut a check. Then find someone who does. Judge Sterling's composure finally fractures, just for an instant, revealing the raw outrage beneath. Pick up the phone in this courtroom, call your director, and tell him that unless he wants Judge Judith Sterling reading this entire transcript, including his name, into the public record on the evening news, he will handwrite a check and messenger it here himself. Do you understand the position you are in? Eleanor gives a tiny, defeated nod. Asterisk. It wasn't retrospect for Arthur Millwood. Judge Sterling explodes, her voice filling the room. It was his reality. It was terror in his own home. It was choosing between heart medication and a fine for a crime in a car he's never seen. Obvious is what it should have been the first time. Not after the 187th victim. She turns her back on Eleanor, mastering her anger, and faces Arthur. Her voice softens, but the gravity only intensifies. Mr. Millwood, do you understand what happened? A man inside the system you trusted stole your name. He sold it. And the system, instead of protecting you, became his collection agency. Arthur nods slowly, a profound sadness in his unseen gaze. I understand, Your Honor. They used my life. My honest life. As a disguise. That's exactly right, Judge Sterling says, her voice thick with a rare emotion. And the shield you paid for with a lifetime of taxes and service was used to stab you in the back. She returns to her seat, a queen retaking her throne. She picks up her gavel, looks at the camera, then at Arthur, then finally at the wretched Eleanor Vance. I've heard all I need to. Here, the entire room seems to lean forward. All 41 citations against Arthur Millwood are vacated, expunged, as if they never existed. A wave of relief so palpable it feels like a wind washes over Chloe and Arthur. Furthermore, Judge Sterling continues. Her words measured and ironclad, the DMV will issue a formal public exoneration to be sent to every credit bureau, every collections agency, and entered into every law enforcement database. This will be done in 48 hours. Not weeks, hours. She stares at Eleanor. Ms. Vance, you will personally ensure that Mr. Millwood receives a certified check for the $400 he paid, plus statutory interest, plus a penalty of $2,500 for the emotional distress and abuse inflicted upon him. You will deliver it to his home within 1 week. You will also enroll him at state expense in permanent PREMIUM identity monitoring service and assign him a dedicated caseworker at the DMV, whose direct line he will have for life. Am I understood? Asterisk Eleanor's, "Yes, Your Honor," is barely audible. Judge Sterling turns to Detective Carter. "Darren Finch, where is he?" "In custody, Your Honor. Arrested 5 days ago. No bail. Charges: aggravated identity theft, wire fraud, conspiracy, elder financial abuse. And we're working with the DEA on organized crime and RICO enhancements, given the scale and profit." "Good. The word is a benediction of vengeance. I want to be notified of the sentencing." Judge Sterling now picks up her pen, a judge about to legislate from the bench through sheer force of will. "I am now placing mandatory recommendations on the record. These are to be forwarded to the governor, the state legislature, and the director of the DMV, and I will be following their implementation personally." Eleanor scrambles for a fresh notepad. 1. Any vehicle registration tied to a non-driver ID automatically triggers a mandatory in-person interview and verification. No more online or mail-in approvals for this population. You look them in the eye. 2. No traffic citation shall be issued based on plate recognition alone. If the camera cannot identify the driver, no fine is issued to the registered owner without a secondary human verification, period. 3. The DMV will institute an annual identity audit, mailer to every resident over 70 and every holder of a non-driver ID. It will list all vehicles under their name. A mismatch means a fraud investigation is open that day. 4. Any citation sent to a person with a documented disability is flagged for mandatory human review before it can move one step further in the process. A living, breathing person must sign off, affirming it makes logical sense. She sets the pen down. These are not suggestions. They are the bare minimum required to prevent this atrocity from ever happening again. This court is a spotlight, Miss Vance, and it is now shining directly into the dark, neglected corners of your department. The world is watching. Let's see if you clean house or just sweep the dirt under the rug. Asterisk Judge Sterling doesn't sit back. She remains poised, her gaze sweeping from the shattered Eleanor Vance to the steadfast Detective Carter, finally landing on Arthur and Chloe Millwood. The gavel is still in her hand, but the judgment is still being spoken. This case is about more than $17,300, she says, her voice now resonating for the record and for the cameras. It's about the value we assign to a human being versus the convenience of a system. Darren Finch saw Arthur Millwood not as a man, but as a blank space on a form to be monetized. The DMV system saw him not as a citizen, but as a data point to be processed. Both failed him. One out of greed, the other out of soul-crushing indifference. She looks directly at Chloe. You, young lady, were the only failsafe. You were the human being who asked the question the multi-billion-dollar department couldn't be bothered with. Does this make sense? You are the hero of this story. Not me, you. Chloe dips her head, wiping her eyes with the heel of her hand. Judge Sterling turns back to the gallery, to the world watching. One question. That's all it would have taken. One person, at any point in 3 years, looking at a ticket for a blind man and saying, wait, but that person didn't exist in the chain. Because the chain was designed to move forward, never to question. Today we are putting a stop sign in that chain. She lifts the gavel, but pauses. Mr. Millwood, you are free to go. You owe the state nothing. The state, however, owes you a debt it can never fully repay. Your peace of mind. Your sense of security in your own home. Your faith. I can order checks and fixes, but I cannot give you back the sleepless nights, the fear, the humiliation. For that, there is no adequate restitution. Only a profound and lasting apology from a system that should be ashamed of itself. Asterisk Arthur Millwood stands, slowly, with Chloe's help. He turns his face toward the bench. Thank you, Judge Sterling. You saw me. When the paperwork said I was a ghost, you saw a man. Judge Sterling gives him the slightest, most respectful nod. It was my honor, sir. The gavel falls. Crack. This case is adjourned. But as the room begins to stir, Judge Sterling speaks again, off the record, but into the open microphone. Detective Carter, a moment. He approaches the bench. The other 186 victims. The ones who aren't in this room. They need a Chloe, They need an advocate. Can your unit connect legal aid, senior services to each one? Not a form letter. A person? We're working on it, Your Honor. It's part of the victim protocol now. Good. See that it happens. Asterisk 7 months later, Darren Finch stood before a different judge. The mountain of evidence was insurmountable. He pleaded guilty to 47 counts of aggravated identity theft, fraud, and elder abuse. He was sentenced to 18 years in state prison with a consecutive 7-year federal sentence for wire fraud. He forfeited everything: the Miami condo, the watch, the crypto wallets. Every recovered cent was funneled into the Victim Restitution Fund. Arthur Millwood received his check for $2,900 exactly 6 days after the verdict. He didn't use it for anything grand. He had Chloe install a new, sophisticated security system in his home one with audio alerts he could understand. He prepaid a year of his prescriptions. The weight that had bowed his shoulders for months began to lift. The DMV, under blistering media scrutiny and legislative pressure, implemented every one of Judge Sterling's recommendations within a year. The Sterling Protocols became law. The annual audit mailer, nicknamed the Millwood Check, now goes out to over 2 million vulnerable Californians. Chloe Millwood, inspired by the advocate she never knew she could be, left her job in retail and is now a paralegal at a nonprofit specializing in elder justice. She tells everyone her grandfather is her hero, and that Judge Judith Sterling is the guardrail at the cliff's edge that society desperately needs. Arthur still lives in his modest home. He still can't see. The world is still a landscape of shadows and sounds. But now, when the mail slot clicks, he doesn't feel a spike of fear. Chloe still comes over to read it to him, but now it's an act of love, not crisis management. He knows that somewhere, the system has finally been forced to see him, not as a number, but as Arthur Millwood, a man who served his country, loved his family, and who, with the help of a fierce granddaughter and an uncompromising judge, won back his own name. But this story leaves us with a pressing question. What I want you to answer in the comments below: is 25 years in prison enough for a man like Darren Finch, who built a luxury life by stealing the identities and peace of mind of nearly 200 vulnerable people? Does that sentence bring real justice, or is some debt too large to be paid behind bars? Your voice is part of this conversation. You're watching the Sterling Standard. We don't just deliver verdicts. We demand accountability. Hit subscribe. Share this with someone who needs to see that the little guy can win. And tell us where you're watching from. Because true justice isn't just about punishing the wrong. It's about ensuring it can't happen again. Asterisk, the gavel's echo faded. But the silence in Judge Sterling's courtroom was heavier, more profound. The air crackled with the spent energy, the energy of a battle fought and won, but at a cost no one had anticipated. Arthur Millwood rose, Chloe's arm a steadfast anchor. The cameras, which had been voracious in their capture of the conflict, now softened, focusing on the quiet triumph of the frail, blind man and the fierce young woman beside him. It was the perfect closing shot. But Judge Judith Sterling was not done. She waited until Arthur was almost at the doors, guided by the bailiff. "Mr. Millwood," she said, her voice cutting the ceremonial silence. It wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of the bench. He stopped, turning his head. "Yes, Your Honor. The state may owe you money and apologies and reforms," she said, leaning forward, her eyes not on him, but on Eleanor Vance, who was shakily packing her files. "But there is one more thing it owes you. It owes you the name of the person who drove that black Mustang." The courtroom, which had begun to exhale, sucked in a collective breath. Chloe froze. Detective Carter, who had been heading for the door, stopped and turned back. "Your Honor?" Carter asked. "The fraudulent registration was the first crime," Judge Sterling stated, her logic as cold and sharp as a surgeon's scalpel. "The 41 moving violations were the second. Darren Finch sold the shell, but someone was inside it. Someone was speeding, running lights, endangering lives. That person has faced no consequences. They have been erased by this focus on paperwork. I want them found." Eleanor Vance looked up, a new kind of dread in her eyes. This was uncharted territory. Detective Carter, Judge Sterling continued. The photos. The ones with the illegal tint. You said they prevented identification. But this was a sophisticated operation. Finch didn't just sell registrations. He sold a package. Who were the buyers? You have financial trails for Finch. Follow the money the other way. Who paid him $2,500 for the Arthur Millwood disguise? Carter nodded slowly, a spark of professional admiration in his gaze. We have aliases, crypto wallets. It's a maze. But you're right. The primary user of that Mustang is a separate subject. We've been calling them the ghost driver in our files. Unghost them, Judge Sterling commanded. I am placing a supplemental order on this case. The LAPD will provide this court with a progress report in 60 days on the identification and apprehension of the individual directly responsible for the moving violations attributed to plate 5XYL889, the DMV, she said, her gaze locking onto Eleanor. Will provide full, unfettered cooperation, including any and all data linking vehicle registrations to the financial logs you undoubtedly keep for title transfers and fees. No red tape. No protocol. You owe Mr. Millwood that much. Eleanor Vance could only nod. The last of her resistance gone, replaced by the grim understanding of a deeper, more personal debt. Judge Sterling stood not to adjourn, but to assent. She walked around the bench and down the few steps to the floor. She did not approach the Millwoods. Instead, she walked to the empty defendant's table and placed her hand on its cold, polished surface. This table, she said to the room, to the cameras. We see the person sitting here as the defendant, the accused. But today, it was a witness stand. Arthur Millwood bore witness to a systemic failure so vast it became a personal hell. But he is not the only witness. Every one of those 187 victims is a witness. And their testimony isn't in spoken words. It's in drained bank accounts, in garnished checks, in fear. She turned to face the camera directly, her expression one of stark, unvarnished truth. You at home, you're a witness now too. You've seen the blueprint of the scam. You've seen the cost of indifference. So here's my charge to you, the public, the final jury. Be the alarm bell. If you have an elderly parent, a disabled neighbor, a veteran friend, asked to see their mail once in a while, not to intrude, but to protect. Be there, Chloe, because the system, even with the Sterling protocols, will never be perfect. It will always be run by people, and people get complacent. Your vigilance is the final, irreplaceable layer of defense. She walked back to her bench, but did not sit. This was the true closing argument. We celebrate today because one man is made whole. But justice is not a singular event. It is a constant practice. It is the practice of asking why, when something doesn't fit. It is the practice of choosing people over process. Darren Finch will serve his time. The DMV will, I hope, reform. But the greatest punishment for this crime, and the greatest prevention for the next, is sunlight. The relentless, unforgiving sunlight of public attention. That is what this court provided today. And that is what you must continue to provide. She finally looked at Arthur Millwood one last time, her voice softening into something akin to reverence. Double quote, sir. You served your country in uniform long ago. Today, without ever intending to, you served it again. You exposed a critical weakness. You have made every citizen in this state safer. For that, you have the profound thanks of this court, and, I believe, of every decent person watching. Arthur Millwood stood a little taller. He gave a slow, solemn nod. It was my duty, Your Honor, then and now. With that, Judge Judith Sterling picked up her gavel. The final crack was not an ending, but a starting pistol. Final epilogy. The 60-day report came in. Detective Carter's team, using the combined data from Finch's seized ledger and DMV payment portals, traced the ghost driver of the Mustang. It was a 24-year-old named Trevor Vale, a would-be social media influencer with a suspended license for multiple duties. He had bought the clean Millwood registration to avoid a permanent revocation. He was charged with all 41 moving violations, driving on a suspended license, and conspiracy to commit fraud. He accepted a plea deal for 18 months in county jail and a permanent loss of driving privileges. The story did not end there. A state legislator, propelled by the public fury from this case, introduced the Millwood Act, which not only codified Judge Sterling's recommendations, but also mandated severe criminal penalties for any DMV employee found abusing access to vulnerable persons' data. It passed with near unanimous support. Chloe Millwood, on her journey to becoming a lawyer, now runs workshops for senior centers on identity theft prevention. Her opening line is always, "My grandfather's blindness was used against him. But our blindness to the details is what truly allows evil to flourish." And Judge Judith Sterling, she still sits on her bench. The cases still come, the petty, the tragic, the absurd. But now, when a traffic citation crosses her desk, she pauses. She doesn't just see the violation. She sees the name. She sees the age. She wonders just for a second if they own a cane or a walker or just a deep, abiding trust that the system will be fair. And then she digs deeper, because one question changed everything. Does a blind man drive? It's a question about logic, about humanity. It's the question that shattered a multi-million-dollar fraud ring. And it's the question that now echoes in the halls of the DMV, and the chambers of the legislature, and in the living rooms of every person who saw Arthur Millwood's story. So we ask you, the final arbiter in the court of public opinion, what question are you failing to ask today? Is there a bill that doesn't add up? A notice sent to a neighbor who's been housebound? Your comment below could be the start of someone else's justice. Share this video. Tag someone who needs to see it. Subscribe to the Sterling Standard. This isn't just a story about a court case. It's a manual for citizenship. Use it.